So, what if I told you the key to happiness isn't about adding something new to your life, but about escaping something that's already there? We're about to dive into a really fascinating discovery. And here's the thing, it didn't start in some sterile lab. Nope. It began right in the middle of a campus crisis, and it reveals a powerful way to, well, get out of your own head. It all starts in a pretty dark place, actually. Back in 2018, a tragic series of student suicides at the University of Bristol, it just brought this simmering mental health emergency to a boiling point. And this wasn't just some isolated incident. It really felt like a breaking point for universities everywhere. The situation on campus was, well, it was dire. It prompted a professor named Bruce Hood to realize he had to do something. He just knew something had to change. And look, this wasn't just happening at Bristol, right? All across the country, students were clearly struggling. There was this immense pressure for perfect grades. Staff were just getting overwhelmed dealing with student anxiety. And the support systems in place, they just weren't cutting it. It became so obvious that a preventative approach was desperately needed, not just a reactive one. So, in response to this crisis, Professor Hood decided to try something completely new. And to be honest, it was something he himself was pretty skeptical about at first. He put together a course called The Science of Happiness. He got the idea from a massively popular class over at Yale. And the concept was simple: a free, non-credit pilot program to teach students the psychological principles of well-being before they hit a crisis point. And the response? It was staggering. I mean, over 500 students gave up their free time to attend. Now, for anyone who's been to university, you know that getting students to do anything for free with 0 credits attached is, well, it's almost unheard of. This was a giant flashing sign that there was a massive unmet need. Okay, so it's popular. Great. But was this course actually improving student well-being? Or was it just, a temporary distraction? That was the million-dollar question. And as a scientist, Professor Hood needed to see some hard data. And oh yeah, the results, they were undeniable. Students who took the course reported a significant 10 to 15% average increase in their mental well-being. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but let me tell you, in the world of psychological interventions, that is a major impact. The experiment had worked. But of course, there was a catch. Follow-up studies showed that these positive effects, they kind of faded within a year. Unless, and this is the important part, unless the students kept practicing the exercises, like journaling or meditation. So something about doing these activities was absolutely essential. But what was it? So this got Professor Hood thinking. He had to dig deeper. There had to be an underlying reason, right? A mechanism. Why did all these seemingly different exercises, from meditation to journaling to volunteering, why did they all work? And why did you have to keep doing them? The usual self-help explanations just weren't going to fly. Saying acts of kindness make you feel good, well, yeah, that's an observation, not an explanation. He was looking for a single unifying theory, the secret sauce that could explain everything. And the answer he found, the big insight, it's all about the way we focus on our self. Okay, to get this, we need to talk about 2 key concepts. Our mind's default state is egocentric. We see the world entirely from our own first-person point of view. But to, function in society, we have to learn to be allocentric. That means seeing things from someone else's perspective. The problem is we get stuck in that default self-focus mode way too often. And as psychologist Mark Leary explains, this constant self-focus can actually become a curse. It's what feeds that inner critic. That voice in your head that's constantly judging you, comparing you to others, and telling you you're not good enough. So if the problem is an overactive inner critic, how do we quiet it down? Well, the answer lies in a specific network in our brain. It's called the default mode network, or DMN for short. You can pretty much think of it as your brain's me network. It's the part that lights up when you're thinking about yourself, your past, your future, and when you're just letting your mind wander, the DMN is in charge. And that often leads to worrying and, well, ruminating. In fact, studies show a wandering mind is very often an unhappy mind. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I'll just stop thinking about my problems. But it's not that simple. As Dostoevsky pointed out over 100 years ago, try to do this right now. Don't think of a polar bear. Whatever you do, do not think of a white polar bear. So, what are you thinking about? Yup, a polar bear.
This little psychological quirk is called ironic thought suppression. The very effort you put into pushing a thought away actually makes it stronger in your mind. This is exactly why telling someone to just stop worrying is honestly the worst advice. It just doesn't work.
And this is the secret sauce. This is why all of those happiness exercises work. They don't try to fight your inner critic. They simply give your brain something else to focus on. They shift your attention. Meditation, you focus on your breath. Journaling, you get your thoughts out of your head and onto the page. Acts of kindness, you focus on other people. They all work by gently quieting that default mode network, not by fighting it, but by redirecting it. Okay, so that brings us to a really simple, super powerful technique that you can use anytime that inner critic starts getting too loud. It's a way to instantly shift your perspective. Here's how you do it. First, think of a problem you're having and say it out loud, in the first person. Something like, I am worried about this deadline. Okay? Now, say the exact same thing, but switch to the third person, using your own name. For instance, John is worried about this deadline. So why on earth does this simple word trick work so well? Because it creates what psychologists call psychological distance. That simple linguistic shift literally pulls you out of that intense, self-focused viewpoint and lets you see your problem from a more objective, outside perspective. And all of a sudden, the problem just feels less personal and way less overwhelming. And this beautifully sums up the core idea. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said it thousands of years ago. We often can't control what happens to us, but we can always control our perspective and our response. These techniques just give us a practical way to do that. The science is pretty clear on this. A huge part of our unhappiness comes from being trapped by our own internal monologue. And the solution isn't to fight that voice, but to skillfully shift our focus away from it. So the only question left is, are you ready to give it a try?